St. Lucia, this is Open Mic, and we are now back with the fourth and final segment of our program. When we left off, I asked Richard a very important question, which has bothered me for some time, and because of his ability to answer those things correctly, I'm learning something myself. So, Richard.
Yeah, so, you know, when the Icelandic Bank, Israeli Copting KSF, Singer Friedlander.
Right.
And these gentlemen came down here. I did some work for them as well. And they basically said, all right, we need to sell all of these properties, but we're not giving them away.
Right.
Because we're now in administration,
yes,
and we need to ensure that there's a proper return based on value.
Okay.
They did valuations and realized that the values had gone down, so they weren't going to get all their money back. So that meant they were taking a haircut. And by the way, it just seemed in this part of the world, everybody who came here, all they ended up with was a haircut. We should
right.
all a bunch of barbers.
Right.
So, but they were at least successful in selling 3 or 4 of them privately. Mm-hmm. The Maho lands,
yes.
The property in Rodney Bay, because they were smaller and they were easier to sell. The bigger ones, the Modern Continental property, the Black Bay, etc.
Even the one by J.
The Shock Beach one. They have not been able to get that one out because they're bigger and they're looking for more money, and unfortunately the investors are not prepared to come up with that kind of money. So they said they'll sit on it and they'll wait.
Worst case scenario, if the Prime Minister said to them, look at me, these are private transactions that went on, I'm not involved in that. I mean, even though they talk of the Barclay land, because what people have to understand, when you have a debt on a land, they cannot take up that land and leave. That land is staying there. Somebody one day will have to buy it and possibly build on it, or whatever the case may be. So what is the hurry on the Prime Minister's part to go and pay for the Black Bay lands or the whatever lands that, because besides the Black Bay lands, there were funds which were taken from to buy more land. So government actually, even though they took a mortgage on the Black Bay lands, but the government ended up with more land, because for a long time we Honeymoon Beach, that's changed hands about 2 or 3 times already. And I think it's good that at least the government have some sort of control over it again. But what I'm trying to say is that rather than go and borrow money to go and pay for them, like 65, 80 million, whatever the case may be, I mean, leave it there. When the time comes, people can take that. Yeah. What could they do to St. Lucia? What can Iceland do?
Well, first of all, and it's not a justification, but I'm just going on based on what I know.
Yeah.
That's the only one I believe the government has actually taken a stand in, right? Because in all of the others, they remain out there, privately owned, in receivership. Government is not interfering, not touching any of that. Right. And they're leaving that to settle itself. But at some point in time, we need to get all of these properties back into some kind of a, because that's the only way we'll develop. Now, government doesn't have the ability to get involved in those, and they should stay out, right? And somebody eventually they'll get 50 cents on the dollar or whatever, and somebody will take it over and run it. Black Bay, from my understanding, there was a lot more involved. There was a Honeymoon Beach, there was a Black Bay, and there was a fact that Invest St. Lucia, then NDC, had put a chunk of money in there, and there were guarantees and different things like that. So government probably were forced in a way to deal with an issue there, and they couldn't simply walk away from it, because it would have given the government of St. Lucia a bad reputation in the financial markets. Now, that's my understanding of what may have happened. The actual details of it and why we had to do what we did when we did it, I can't tell you, right? Because clearly, sometimes you got to take a decision. Look at Paradis. Government has nothing to do with that, right? Has done nothing, have not tried to buy out, have not tried to take over, and it's still hanging there, getting rotten every day. And I actually went to them a couple of years back, and I said, well, look, why don't the government kind of take that over under, the ability to for public interest, and under arrangement where it can be put up for sale, and money's paid back to creditors in the order of their ranking. They just didn't want to stay.
I'll tell you something, about Le Paradis. I mean, I was at NDC when it all started, and I was no longer at NDC, but I did tell the Prime Minister on more than one occasion. I gave him my advice on what he should have done with Cleo, which I'm going to mention to you and to the public today, and that is, the Prime Minister actually taught the Prime Minister of Trinidad at law school. And to me, there is no better relationship than professor to student. That's number one. as you know, the Trinidad government took over a lot of the CLICO shares.
Yes.
And I said to him, look, why don't you go down to the Prime Minister of Trinidad, say to her, look, there's $40 million US at stake here now. There's no way that it's worth 40 million anymore. Why don't you, as a Trinidadian, get a couple of investors to come in, form a company, take it over, and make something out of it with the understanding that when the project is finished, if the project genuinely costs, say, I'm saying that they put another 40 million, just for argument's sake, $80 million, then everybody prorates what the value of the company then. I mean, there are several ways to skin a cat. You can't just leave a project out there, just go into the door. Because what I see now, those buildings are gone.
It's very sad. You know, the fact it means the loan was 50 million US that CLICO had given. And so with interest, I was already up to about 80 million.
Right.
As part of the government takeover of the CLICO assets and whatnot, that asset was sent to Central Bank,
yes,
who then set up a company to kind of look after it.
You're talking of CLICO?
Yeah, of CLICO.
It was sent to the
Central Bank in Trinidad, because government had intervened.
Yes, right.
And they said, okay, we'll bail out, but in return they're taking all these assets,
yes,
they ring-fenced them, and Central Bank was the one looking after that, and they obviously put it in a, I don't know how whatever they did. And they were willing to take 30 million US for that debt.
Yeah, for the 40 million.
Because the developer at the time was trying to get back in, and he did a deal with them. They would have taken 30 million to give the whole, to take out the debt altogether. But then the developer would have needed another 50 to finish the project. Couldn't find it. And so there it is. Now, for government to kind of try and force the issue and maybe do a deal with Trinidad to get some Trinidad investors in, would have meant to a large extent, all of those investors would have said, I want a guarantee from the government of Trinidad.
Okay.
The government of Trinidad was already so burnt by that CLICO involvement.
That much
they said, no, we're going to let it be run by Central Bank, by, I think was it First Citizens or Republic that got involved, took over some of CLICO's assets, and go through a process. But I just found it took so long. Eventually, they appointed a liquidator, who's a gentleman from Trinidad. He's trying to sell the asset, having, from what I could see, no success. So, if we had somehow managed to get this into a more private arrangement with the backing of the government of St. Lucia and the backing of the government of Trinidad, this could have been a lot better off now. But it took so long. Governments are always kicking the can down the road.
This is what I've been saying to you earlier, Richard. The governments, I'm not going to the Kenny administration, any administration in power, they have to start thinking outside the box and start thinking like business people, because government is a business. When you take $800 million of people's taxes every year, you have to be made accountable. And these are the things that have to be done. The old-fashioned way of doing business, just letting things ride, which it cannot go on. It's very, very sad. But hopefully that there's one other question that I had for you, Richard, and that is, So, the other question I had for you was the question of, this bond ceiling. I don't know who came up with it, who put it under which regime it started, borrowing money through bonds. Are you concerned in any way about that?
I'm not that familiar with the actual legislation regarding the ceiling. It may have been something that was pegged to, say, our GDP.
Okay.
Right? In that respect, it was probably a prudential ceiling, because government doesn't just borrow via bonds. They have treasury bills, they can take commercial loans, etc., etc. And then they take loans from CDB, IMF, everybody else. But in terms of just the pure bonds, they may well have decided you put a ceiling. Remember, in the States, they had a debt ceiling, but that was for overall debt. Right? So maybe this debt ceiling, this bond ceiling was something, whether it's pegged to the GDP or what, I don't know. Taking it up is not necessarily unreasonable, but it's risky, right? Because if you're going to issue more bonds and you're issuing it at rates that are higher than our weighted average cost of capital now, then the cost of servicing that is going to increase and we're going to run into problems. We are already at 24.5% of our GDP for revenue. We cannot squeeze more revenue out of this country. We can't increase our VAT, right? I mean, VAT has been doing very well, but what I'm saying is we can't simply increase rates, because, you know, if we go beyond 25%, then we'll become a country where taxes are a burden on our people.
Right.
And so we have to make sure that our problem is not revenue, our problem is expenditure. And part of that expenditure is the cost of servicing debt. So that's clearly, increase the bond ceiling, fine. But if the increase is going to be concessionary bonds at, you know, something less than 5%, then fine. But if you have to go and borrow at 7.5%, two things. A, is going to create a problem for us to repay. B, you ain't going to get it in the market.
That's right.
The market is going to say, I want 9%.
That's right.
Because as far as they're concerned,
a lot of us are already at a risk.
We're at risk.
The fact that we're paying 7.5% or 7 is already at a risk, you know. And that's what I keep saying all the time. It bothers me. And you know, when I heard the Prime Minister say, well, you know, I don't have the cash to do X, Y, and Z, so I'm going to float more bonds. You know, he has to understand that that's another debt you created.
It is, but if we are careful how we do it, and the extra money we use is used for projects in the productive sector that gives a kind of return that in essence allows us, through growth in the economy, to have no problem repaying, then fine. But we have had an issue over the years in the quality of the government capital expenditure. It takes too long, it costs too much money, and so therefore the returns are not good enough. My good friend Osbert Deverne once told me, when I was talking to him about, I think it was Sir John's budget, and he said there are two ways to bring down that debt to GDP, even if you want to borrow more money. And one is to reduce your debt, the second is to grow the economy. So if we can find ways of growing the economy faster than the increase in the debt and the cost of servicing it, we're okay.
That's what I said to you a while ago, that I commend the Prime Minister for being able to range $150 million, but I remain unhappy the fact that he's putting it into roads, because they're not going to produce anything. It is better sometimes to say to the Kuwaitis or other people, look at me, oh, can I have then 40 million, but I don't want to put it. I'm not saying it will happen, but I have no evidence that they're trying to do that. And that is my worry. Richard, I want to say it has been fantastic having you here today. I continue to learn so much from you. Thank you very much. But as usual, the hour goes by extremely quickly, and I see I'm getting all signs from Junior telling me that my time is up. So, St. Lucia, this is Open Mic saying till next Sunday, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for listening.